over hot forges to produce one-of-a-kind collector's knives. These knives can cost anywhere from $200 to $10,000 apiece. Professional bladesmith Sid Birt of Belmont and part-time craftsman Jim Porter of Spencer specialize in the Damascus process, a unique forging method that takes time and patience but produces worthwhile and beautiful results.
It's something you have to want to do and have the patience, because there's a lot to learn, and you make a lot of mistakes.
The time it takes to make each knife varies greatly on the degree of difficulty on each particular piece. A piece that's highly engraved and finely fit with fossilized walrus or stones of different type can take up to possibly 4 weeks or 6 weeks to finish. A common working knife can be made in a couple of days. Each knife is first designed on paper, and then many times it's cut out in cardboard to make sure that the balance is right, that you have the right room in the handle, and so on and so forth. Then once the design is firm, I like to set it aside for at least 30 days, maybe more. Sometimes I'll let them set for as much as a year, and then go back to it and see if I still like it. If I like it after that period of time, then I'll go ahead and make it. Damascus steel was, as far as we know, originated in about the 8th century, and the Vikings were one of the first people that used it. In 1974 or 75, the Smiths in the United States, if you will, reinvented Damascus steel. In other words, we discovered how to do it again. And the process is somewhat different than what they used at that time, but we get results that are very similar. What we start out with first to form the billet, we take a high carbon bar and put a low carbon on top of it, put another high carbon bar on top, and then a low carbon bar on top of that, which gives us 4 layers. The high carbon steel and low carbon steel blended together makes a blade that is very hard and yet very flexible. These are forged welded together, and in order to do that, you have to have some means of holding on to it, so we weld a steel bar onto it to make us a handle. Then that is drawn out with the hammer, lengthened to twice its length approximately, cut in half and folded back over. Well, when that's folded over, that gives you 8 layers. And you continue on with that, 8, 16, 32, 64, until you get to 512 layers. That makes a nice flat random pattern blade. When I say that, I mean that the blade is not manipulated in any way. It's just forged into the shape of a knife blade once you get to that number.
When you're forging a blade, whether it's Damascus or carbon steel, they're basically forged the same manner. You start at the point and forge backwards on the blade. The point is forged first, then the primary angle is forged on the sides. Next, you forge the taper, full-length taper in the blade. And I always forge on my camp knives, such as the one I forged. I put forged butt cap on it, and gives it a little more resistance to breakage if you drop it. The handle's not as, likely to fall off. On a factory knife, your cutting edge is ground with a flat area along the cutting edge. It's more like a chisel, real fine chisel. Whereas what I put on is a Moran or Appleseed grind. The edges are actually in an arc on both sides, and it supports the cutting edge and enables it to last a lot longer than a standard grind.
When you etch it in the etching compound, which is one of various different types of acids, you end up with a topography in the blade because the carbon steel eats away, making a low area, and the nickel steel stays high. So you have a very beautiful blade that you can see the pattern in it. You can really see each time that it was hit with a hammer. And yet you have a very strong blade that remains sharp for a long time. Knives are tools. And when you make a knife, you have to keep that in mind. It has to be a functional tool. Art knives are also tools, but they're one of a kind that's created in the maker's mind. And that's what makes them valuable. There's different art knives, and each one is an entity unto itself.
This is sort of special. It's one I gave to my wife. It's the 25th Damascus that I made, and it was made near our 25th anniversary, so she got this for an anniversary present. It's had several firsts. It was the first Damascus to get my journeyman stamp. Got it in May, and our anniversary was in June. So I got to use the journeyman smith stamp on it, and it's also the first art class knife that I made.
I've had a fascination with knives all my life, really, and I've made my first knife when I was very young, and kept that one, and then I started making some later on in life, and I'd get one finished and someone would want to buy it, so I'd make another one, and so the story goes. I just have continued to make them all these years.